Route 77 podcast. Today we're venturing into the profound realm of agape love, as illuminated by C.S. Lewis in the Four Loves. Agape, the highest form of love, calls us to love selflessly, sacrificially, and unconditionally, mirroring the love God has for each of us. It's about extending grace and love to everyone without conditions or expectations. Through personal stories and insights, we'll explore how agape love enriches our lives, challenges us, and ultimately reflects our faith in action. So let's open our hearts to the transformative power of agape love. Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. I am Natasha, your host, and I am here with Monique.
Hello.
And David.
Hello.
And this is our first episode in our second year of podcasting.
And we are also in the season of Lent, which is perfect for this topic.
Yes. Perfect.
That word perfect. Was it perfect?
It was perfectly perfect. In the last 3 weeks, we have been in a series on C.S. Lewis's The Four Loves. We started with storge, which was your familial love. Then we talked about philia, which was the brotherly love. And then for love of friendship.
Yep.
And then the third one, we talked about eros, which is the romantic love. And now we're talking about agape love, which is the highest form of love, according to Lewis. And I agree with him.
Yep.
That it is selfless, sacrificial, and unconditional. I find it interesting the way Lewis talks about it. And I agree with him. He finds it extremely difficult to talk about this love just because it's almost mysterious.
Yes.
That he has a hard time. He just basically, here's a little brief scratching of the surface of what it is. But he said without agape love, the other three loves wouldn't come to fulfillment. A person who is not a believer can feel those other three loves, but not to the fullness that they're meant to be. And that agape, this unconditional love of God, boosts the other ones. But it's not the other way around. There's nothing that can create a boost to agape. It is already the most powered. If you're coming from a video game thing, it'd be like your biggest power up. There's no leveling it up.
You're at the top. There's nowhere else to go.
No. And it's just something that we gain as believers. God grants to us this love, and it's unconditional.
I want to talk about that. You've mentioned unconditional. I want people to understand what that means, because a lot of people have that belief that when they say unconditional, that means that no matter, you can do anything you want, doesn't matter, God will always love you, and it's acceptable. It is unconditional. No matter what, God will always love you. But it doesn't mean that there are not consequences.
That he won't honor free will decisions.
He will not force
separating yourself from him.
He will never force you to do anything you do not want to do or cannot. But he will convince you in the most appropriate ways.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like we have affection, love. We have brotherly love. We have eros love. But there always seems to be a thing like you go that can take that love away.
Yeah.
You see people all the time, even in Christian circles, where they have a break with family, friends, a break with a marriage partner.
Yep.
Sometimes in a way there is like reasonable when there's things with abuse or
betrayal.
A person is toxic and you can't have them in your life. But there's this agape love like comes above that, where there's a way that you can love even the people that you cannot love in the other ways.
Yeah.
And it's just learning how to show that love, because we're commanded to love even your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And we say it like, yeah, we have to love our enemies. Like it's so easy. Or of course we're supposed to love our enemies, but there's always the people that we consider like beyond. Oh, Hitler deserves to go to hell. Or like everybody goes to Hitler, but it's just an easy one to go to. Or
he's our go-to bad guy.
Yeah. Or Herod or Putin or
Nero.
Of course, they're supposed to go to hell because they're really bad.
But do you think that just because they are in hell, that God has cut his love off, that he doesn't, that even though they are there, he no longer loves them? Am I going to hurt your brain?
You might hurt my brain. I don't know. It's just like that's where the line between justice and a loving God is it going to force?
Because I think ultimately God doesn't stop his love in any way. But that doesn't mean that his justice can't be given.
You love your child to the ends of the earth and back, and they can still hate you and run off, and you have to let them, they're adults. You can't control them. You have to let them to their own devices, but it doesn't mean you love them any less.
Exactly.
And
You knew where I was going.
how so too much brainwaves.
You're so smart. Because that's ultimately what love is about. The sacrificial love, the ultimate unconditional. He will always love you, even if you're in hell. He just can't do anything about it because that is what you've chosen, which is very sad. Though he will never force anyone. And this is the thing I don't understand about people who say, it doesn't matter what you do. Christ died for all people everywhere. It doesn't matter whether you live for him or not, you will go to heaven. No, that doesn't make sense because that negates God's justice. It doesn't negate his love, but it's justice.
What do you think, David?
Did you fall asleep?
Nope, I'm thinking.
That's okay. I'm going to make sure you're still there.
Yep. Yeah, you're allowed to think. All of a sudden it was like radio silence.
What you guys described in the pack is demonstrated through God's persistence and opportunity. He does this through Jerusalem, for example. Even though they keep turning away, worshiping other gods, God still persists. He still says, you're my chosen people. He still favors them. He still loves them. He still does these actions so that he can use them to bring forth a son that then allows all, even the Gentiles, to become saved. But it's the same idea as a mother's love for her children. It's more on the side of mercy. The mother will give exception but finally back off so that the child may learn a lesson. But the mother still provided those warnings. She's persisted even if the child does not learn anything. The mother will still give the warnings. Now, if the mother didn't love the child, she wouldn't give the warnings. The unconditional nature of that would be continually giving those kind of warnings.
A continual pursuit of trying to get them to change their ways.
It's like how Jesus continuously pursues us in order to save us, so that we may know who he is.
Yep. And as long as you are on this side of the grave, he will continue to pursue you with his love. He said, I'm just going to stand here and knock. Hopefully you will open the door before it's too late. Because that is, they speak of the unforgivable sin and everyone goes, what is the unforgivable sin? It's the rejection of Jesus.
Of the gift.
Of his
Grace.
gift of grace, yeah.
And one thing Lewis does say, that agape is disinterested love. It loves not in order to gain, but to give.
Yep.
There's basically saying it's disinterested because it really does not matter
whether you love them back,
who the person is, what the person is, anything that has zero impact on agape love. So it's interesting to think that way. Even though we like to say it's agape, it's unconditional, that we all have that, we can all show that love. There's parts of our human nature that are just like, we can't fully grasp that because we always think, like Lewis points out, that we're such good people, that we're lovable. We have this idea we're not as bad as Hitler or Nero, so we must be good people. Easier to love than Hitler and Nero and Herod and all these ones. Yeah. And yet we forget that we have the same heart.
I was a leader for Alpha, the program that kind of introduces people who don't know much about Christianity, what Christianity is all about. And Nicky Gumbel made this one example of our nature, our sinful nature. And he says, pick a measuring line. Say it's from the floor to the top of your doorpost. At the bottom of the door, who would you put there? These are the worst of the worst people that you just, they're nasty, terrible, horrible, icky people. In the middle, probably put yourself. Or who would you put at the very top? Oh, Mother Teresa, Billy Graham, they got all these, Princess Diana, whoever you think is the epitome of goodness. And where would you put yourself? Most people would put themselves about in the middle, right? Because we're not as bad as Hitler, but we're not Mother Teresa, Billy Graham. Humility. Now, take that doorpost and put it against the Empire State Building.
It's too high.
And even then, it's too high. If you put that measuring into the universe way out there, now that doorpost is probably about 1 millimeter big, and we're all in this stream, envisioned by God's holiness, our sinfulness. Every single one of us are at the bottom of the door.
Yeah.
We have all
Gone
sinned
our own way.
the glory of God.
Yeah.
But
And
that
wages
does
of sin is death. It's not like we can go, I was a little bit better than like the other person. Even then, it'd be easier to love me. I'm not making it as difficult as that person over there to love me.
one of the things I hope and pray will not be something I would have to envision when I get up to that judgment seat, is that God plays a video of my life. Because, I'm going to go exit stage left.
But the thing is, he already knows all these things. And yet the thought of it being a view for other people makes us more angry and embarrassed. And then it is the fact that God knows it already.
Yes, I know God knows it, but don't show it to everybody.
But everybody doesn't matter. Yet that's what we're more worried about.
Yeah.
Like we have this, imagine if everybody could
See
my thoughts. Yeah, and especially
my
because
thoughts.
thoughts, you can think things and then choose not to say them. And just because you think it doesn't mean that you believe it. So you might be annoyed and you go, oh, but then you move on, not just because you're good at holding your tongue. But we're like, no, we can't have our thoughts out there because people would see them and then they would know what I'm thinking. But yet God knows. And we're more worried about our fellow person knowing these things about us than the holy God who already knows these things about us sent his son to die for us. Like the parable of the 99 sheep, where the shepherd went out to find the one lost lamb. That kind of shows that had Christ needed to come for one single person, he would have. And it didn't matter if there was a billion people or if there's one person, Christ would have come if it was a single person.
Right.
So how much like his love, despite if the only person that was not going to be saved was Hitler, he still would have come to save Hitler. And we would have been like, why bother? That's what our brains would say. Even if he chooses not to receive this gift, I am still giving it. That's why he says that it is uninterested or disinterested love. He did it anyway.
It didn't matter if the whole world rejected him or the whole world accepted him. He was going to do it anyways.
Yeah. Or if only one person accepted him out of the whole world, it was worth it for him.
Thankfully, there's a whole lot more than just one person.
But it's just an interesting thing to think about that Jesus would have come to die for Hitler alone, or Nero alone, or Herod alone, had that been necessary.
No greater love is this.
And so he says people will put down their lives for friends, but for their enemy,
they would not even. Which leads us to that ever perfect verse in the Bible that everybody knows. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. He came to save it.
So then we can look at agape versus human love. And C.S. Lewis says the natural loves are not self-sufficient. Something else, at once less and more than love himself, must come in to complete them. God has given the gift of love in the world so that even those who don't believe in him can still experience them to a degree. But the agape love of God just creates them fully and allows you to experience them more fully. And it's just, and I don't think we appreciate that sometimes as Christians. We just go, yeah, you, me, and God, that's the way it goes. And like flippantly talk about it, as opposed to like really understanding Monique and myself and David, like our friendship, family, however you want to define this, like this love that we share. We talk quite frequently about how God planned for this. He brought the three of us together, Monique and I together, for living in this house. And the camaraderie and the love that we feel for one another, I don't think we always fully grasp that it's made even more because of God's agape love. And it's because we don't necessarily dwell on it all the time, but I think it's something that we should remember. Like sometimes we go like, I have this best friend, or I have this great spouse, or all these things. Like we just love each other so much and we're always doing things for each other, but we forget that God's love is that third. They say like a three,
the triangle,
the chords, 3 chords. I think that works in not just marital love.
No,
it's for any sort of love. That third chord is what keeps that love together. Because a rope of 3 chords is not easily broken.
Right.
With the help of God's agape love, friendships can be resilient, families can work through things, and marriages can survive the ups and downs. What do you think, David?
Yeah, no, that's pretty solid.
What are ways that we can actually show agape love? What should I do today to check off the agape love?
That's
But it's hard because sometimes you don't actually think about it, but then is it not how you're going to do it? You're going to go out of the house and be like, "Okay, I got to show my agape love today. I did to the homeless person. Now I'm good." We sometimes think of that in our faith, like the way we do things for God.
we have a
I
checklist.
I gave my tithes and offerings. I helped out the poor person. I didn't give the finger to the guy that cut me off. We think we showed God's love, but then the more we probably were, it was a pride thing.
Yeah.
Look how good I show God's love today. And you're like, that's actually not God's love right there at all. Lewis talks about to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken. When you've been hurt by family, when you've been hurt by friends, when you've been hurt by your spouse, when you've been hurt by the church, there's a tendency to shut yourself off and be like, forget this. I don't want to be hurt again. And yeah, you understand. I'm not saying get back into that relationship that's unhealthy or go
Jump
back to
into
that
a whole new one.
or go back to that church that hurt you, or if it's something you can't work through. But people can have a tendency to cut themselves off from
Completely.
love completely and isolate themselves. No more certain for me.
Yeah.
And yet, if Jesus or God has done that, like every time we hurt him and broke his heart,
He would never have done anything.
and we're called to open ourselves up to that hurt. Again, I'm not saying go back into a relationship that's abusive or toxic. Don't go back in a place that's not safe. But sometimes it does mean giving a marriage relationship another chance if it's not an abusive. Sometimes it means talking to that family member that is totally racist or sexist or whatever, and you can still show them love.
And you could also do that when you're in my presence, if you could refrain from speaking in such a manner.
Yeah. But even then, if they choose to be whatever it is that they are that cause that rift, we do that all the time with God.
Yeah.
God's saying, just you're fine, but please don't sin. And then you
Step out
turn
the
around
front
and
door.
you do it. So if he put that same condition
Mhm.
on us, which is why it's unconditional, then we can't be putting those conditions on that love.
There's that prayer. Lord, so far today has been pretty good. I haven't cursed at anybody. I haven't yelled at anybody. I haven't cut anybody off in traffic, but I'm about to get out of bed now. I need all the help I can get.
We're living in a society that is becoming more and more divisive.
And colder to God.
When you look at politics, there's the right and the left. There's almost no in between anymore. Those gulfs are basically disappearing. You look at the LGBTQ plus community, and
I've lost how many letters are in there.
there's a lot. I try to say, but anyway, like I try to be respectful of what they want to include in there, but I can't always keep up with the exact. I've seen 2S LGBTQ2IA something. I understand that some point you're just going to have to say, because they're all going to fit in there some point. I think cis should be in there too. But anyway, it's if you don't agree, then you're the enemy. And then we treat even those who choose to have pro-choice versus pro-life like it's just a constant battle.
Yeah.
And yes, there's times to stand up for truth.
Yeah.
But then did Jesus just start yelling at everybody who wasn't obeying or there was times he talked with the Pharisees, but those were the people who were representing him or like the faith. So there's times when there's churches, if they're misrepresenting God and the truth, then he should stand up against them. When he dealt with a regular person, he didn't just come right in with, stop sinning. He would eventually bring it around to that. Like we talked to the woman by the well, he didn't immediately go, you're just sleeping with a bunch of people or you're divorced multiple times. But he eventually came around to that. He had a conversation that led to this thing going, hey, you know this stuff and you want this, but this is what you're doing. But he created a conversation around it.
Yeah.
And he showed love. And we're not even told if the woman ever changed her ways.
Same with the woman that was caught in adultery. He told her to go and sin no more after.
And we assume that he must have, because Jesus just said to go sin no more, but they say, he said that to us and we had a tendency to go out and sin more. So we can't just go, oh, obviously they listened. And he didn't track them down or made sure. One day we might find the woman by the well in heaven, or the woman who committed adultery, or any of these people. But it's, yeah, we speak truth in times, but then at the same time, like, we realize that they have the right for their decision and what they do with their lives, whether they vote liberal, whether they, the LGBTQ plus community, whether they're pro-choice or pro-life. Like, ultimately, that means nothing when it comes to agape love. There's no conditions on it.
This is what Pastor Justin said in the sermon yesterday. The reason why sin happens is because we dehumanize people. We turn them into objects rather than into the image bearers of God. Every person on this planet are made in the image of God.
Yeah. And we not only that, we almost humanize God in a sense, because we like put God in this, like, he's going to act like me. What I'm doing is going to be, this is what you're going to do. You forget that he's a holy God that loves perfectly, and that maybe the things he's telling you to do are better than what you think you're going to do. I remember, for some reason, it came across my brain today. There was this movie, and this was probably in the 90s or even earlier. It was like a modern Noah's Ark. He was making the ark, and everyone was making fun of him. And then it rained, and the people were like, let us in. And he's just, okay, you can come in. Somehow that was the correct answer. The writers of this movie know what should have happened, like how we would make the right decisions, but God didn't. Or the theoretical God. I'm sure they didn't consider him real, but the story anyway. But yeah, sometimes we dehumanize the people around us when we're supposed to be, basically, that has zero to do with the love of God. They are image bearers of God. They deserve love. How we show that love varies from person to person. There's a time to be safe. Do I want to go down on my own to the middle of gang territory? Probably not. There's times to be wise. Do I go back into an abusive relationship? No. Do I go back into a toxic relationship where it's like basically making me suicidal because of that? There's ways that sometimes I think God's calling other people to love those people in a more direct, personal way.
Yep.
I don't have to be involved in my ex's life, but I do care what happens to him spiritually. I want a good life for him. The life that he's chosen is going to hurt him in the long run. And from what he has shown of his life, the fruits of his life, as much as he says he's a Christian, I haven't seen the fruit of that in his life. God can call people who aren't me to be witness in his life, but I can do my best to love him regardless of what happened in our relationship. And I pray for him. So how I talk about people is very big. Like, I am 110% against disparaging people ever. I don't go online and try to make like Trudeau jokes. I don't go online and make Trump or Biden jokes, like where I'm disparaging them as people. I don't agree with the late night shows that try to make fun of people. There's one thing when they're the roast that people expect and they're for that purpose, but when you're making fun of people because they don't agree with you, then that's not agape love.
Yeah. You can disagree with people and pray for them, but you should not.
And I don't think that is like a way to go about showing Christ's love. He called the Pharisees a pit of vipers and white walls faces. He was also making a point. I don't think it was name calling.
No,
I think it was a metaphorical description.
Yeah, for what they were doing to the people around them, how they were making themselves to be.
Because he didn't go around using that language all over the place.
No.
It was very specific, and it was for
teachers,
like
the Pharisees.
Yes, David?
He also knew their hearts. There's an aspect to Jesus that we don't have. And that's his ability to understand and know the hearts and minds of those he interacts with.
And we don't have that, so we should not be trying to take on his actions the way he talked to the Pharisees.
Exactly. The way we interact with people has to be dramatically different than the way Jesus interacted with people. because we don't have a nature in which we are able to see the hearts and minds of those people.
And again, if you look at the amount of times he would call somebody that type of a thing compared to his whole ministry was a very smaller amount of times as specific people, the same people, or the same groups of people.
Although, if I did walk into one of those known pastors who go out into the street and bully and downgrade people, like they go to these functions and stuff where, say, the LGBTQ people go, and he calls them names, I myself would probably get in his face and call him a viper or a liar.
Yeah.
And that he has nothing to do with Jesus. He should not be degrading his name by calling himself a preacher. Oh, that just irks.
Yeah. And the same when you have...
See, these are the kind of people that Jesus would say these things to.
Even like when you see ones like Joel Osteen and Benny Hinn, when you have them, if you pay this much, then God's going to pay you back tenfold, and prosperity gospel and lies. And I think we need to call them what they are.
Yeah. But these are people who step out in the name of Jesus.
But would I go on, say, Facebook and be like, stupid Benny Hinn, I can't believe he's such an ignorant. So it's like, I could say, oh, this is just completely false, but I'm not going to go around like, even if I disagree with them, going around like name calling, because I don't think that's, but you can call light to the truth, and you can say that someone is being dishonest when they are. But again, I know the big one with Trudeau is like calling him Trudeau. And I'm just, are we in grade 5?
Yes.
It means nothing except that you're making fun of someone. You're calling them an idiot, making fun of their name, playing on words, but it's childish and it doesn't help anything, and it doesn't show the love of God. Because I don't remember him going around and
calling people
Nicodidiot, the Nicodemus or something.
Idiot.
The Nick of the idiot. It's like, he didn't do that. Disparage people.
Yes. What is it? Okay.
Yeah. Or look at teeny tiny Zacchaeus. I could step on you. He doesn't say that. He just says, hey, I'm going to your house.
He loved because the guy was, come on down, I'm going to your house.
Yeah.
Everybody hated him though, but that was who he wanted to spend.
So the Pharisees are like, look who he's spending time with, tax collectors and prostitutes. And he doesn't see them that way.
No.
And even if he knows they're dishonest tax collectors and actual prostitutes doing their business, it didn't stop him from showing his love, because it wasn't based on they were.
His big thing was people who made themselves look better than anybody else when they are no better than anybody else.
So what does a well person have to do with a doctor? Yep. If you don't think there's anything wrong with you, why would I come to you?
Yep.
Even though he well knows that there is something wrong. Yep. They're sinners.
I hate to tell you this, but your condition is terminal.
Yes. But if you're not willing to admit to it, then the people who admitted that they were sinners and understood that and were wanting to have a change in their life, then he had time for them. But it doesn't mean that he didn't show love. I think like by labeling the Pharisees like vipers and whitewashed sepulchre.
Thank you. I was leaving that.
But if they hadn't realized that, maybe that turned some of their hearts eventually. You don't know. We aren't given a record of every single Pharisee other than Paul, who was a Pharisee, and he did find out that he was wrong, and he accepted that and humbled himself and moved forward in Christ. Speaking truth to somebody can be what God uses as a catalyst of change in their life. They actually maybe reflect later that night or something and be like, maybe I am. And then they do a little more research or whatever.
And he tells the parables that showed them what kind of.
Yeah. So as a single person, it's not much different than being any other person. You were called to show love to every single human person, regardless of their gender identity or their sexual orientation, their choice of their pro-choice, pro-life, their choice of politician. Those things actually matter zero when it comes to showing love.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you accept that what they're doing is correct and truthful in accordance to the scripture. But if that was God's condition, then none of us would be saved, because he came and died for us while we were yet sinners. So there was no redeeming quality in ourselves.
Right there. But God demonstrates his own love for us, and this, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Romans 5:8.
Yes. And remember that there is no safe investment. To love is to be vulnerable. And Christ became vulnerable in his humanity.
One of my favorite love verses in the Bible is in 1 John 4:9-10. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sin. It's nothing we did.
No.
We are incapable of loving God first because God is love. If his love isn't in us first, we are incapable of loving him. It's only because of his great love for us that we are able to love.
So there are some challenges to this. You're vulnerable. It's difficult to consistently live out agape in a world that is so self-centered, about personal truths, about canceling people. It's hard to really live these things.
And social media is really bad for that.
Mm-hmm.
The people, all of a sudden you get in, and I've seen that even in Christian circles, you get one person who says one thing that somebody doesn't like, and the amount of backbiting, the way they go back and forth at each other, and then they start calling each other rude names. What are you doing?
I know, especially of trivial things that really don't matter in the light of things. Here's what Lewis mentions in his chapter on agape. We think we have chosen our peers. In reality, a few years difference in the dates of our births, a few more miles between certain houses, the choice of one university instead of another. Any of these chances might have kept us apart. But for a Christian, there are strictly speaking no chances. A secret master of ceremonies has been at work. Christ, who said to the disciples, "You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you," can truly say to every group of Christian friends, "Ye have not chosen one another, but I have chosen you for one another."
And that's what God did with us.
And even the people that we come into contact with, that we work with, that we are family members with, God has placed us in these positions to show love to these people. Yeah. But we're placed in this, you and me and David, as like a mixture, I think, between what you would say is the affectionate familia, like we're familia, like we're like family but friends. Yep. Both of those kind of mixed together. We're believers.
But that's exactly what, when you are Christian, you are now part of the family of God.
Yeah.
So we are eternal family.
But even then, we're in this house and we're like, we should get a renter. Well, then we ended up with our housemate Carly for a couple of years. So then there's a person who is not a believer, but was in our realm for us to have effect on in a loving manner. And now we have two other young ladies who are, again, same thing. We have them in our realm of whoever's in our realm is not an accident. Whoever you work with is not an accident to God.
Nope.
Whoever you do hobbies with is not an accident to God. Whoever you roommate is not an accident to God. Yep. You've been put in these places specifically to show the love of God. Seeds have been planted up until that point that God used then to germinate into faith. You don't know what seeds your love is planting into people. For me, I may not agree with them, but I'm not coming out and saying I don't agree with them because I know that they're people I know that are not Christians. Why am I expecting them to act like it? If they find out I'm a Christian, they'll realize too that I haven't treated them differently just because I disagree with them.
And that is showing that agape love. It doesn't matter what your life is like right now, because I know you don't know who God is. But I'm going to be here in case you ever want to know. And I am not going to hide the fact that I am a believer in Jesus, that he is my Lord and Savior. I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. No,
that's not how
God
did it for me. Yeah. The love of God is never ending.
You can't even scratch the surface, like he said, because there's just so much in it. I'm reading this children's book that my pastor had told me about. It's called the Jesus Storybook Bible, written by Sally Lloyd Jones. Every story whispers his name. One of the lines says, no matter what, in spite of everything, God would love his children with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. And I just love that line. It's just never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. Mm-hmm. Because his love is forever.
Here's how Lewis puts it at the end of this chapter. Is it easy to love God? Asks an old author. It is easy, he replies, to those who do it. I have included 2 graces under the word charity, but God can give a third. He can awake in man towards himself a supernatural, appreciative love. This of all gifts, the most to be desired. Here, not in our natural loves, or even in ethics, lies the true center of all human and angelic life. With this, all things are possible. And with this, where a better book would begin, mine must end. I dare not proceed. God knows, not I, whether I have ever tasted this love. Perhaps I have only imagined the tasting. Those like myself whose imagination far exceeds their obedience are subject to a just penalty. We easily imagine conditions for higher than any we have really reached. If we describe what we have imagined, we may make others and make ourselves believe that we have really been there. And if I have only imagined it, is it a further delusion that even the imagining has at some moments made all other objects of desire, yes, even peace, to have no more fears, look like but broken toys and faded flowers? Perhaps. Perhaps for many of us, all experience merely defines, so to speak, the shape of that gap where our love of God ought to be. It is not enough. It is something. If we cannot practice the presence of God, it is something to practice the absence of God, to become increasingly aware of our unawareness till we feel like men who should stand beside a great cataract and hear no noise, or like a man in a story who looks in a mirror and finds no face there, or a man in a dream who stretches out his hand to visible objects and gets no sensation of touch. To know that one is dreaming is to be no longer perfectly asleep. But for news of the fully waking world, you must go to my betters. So he's even saying, and he's not going to say he's one of the greatest Christian writers, but he's a great Christian writer, is sitting there going, I'm trying to talk about this, but do I really understand it? I think I understand it, but who's to say we really understand it? Because until you 100% know that you've experienced it, everything else might be a sham. So it's a matter to apply the best that you can. Look in your own heart, see if the attitudes that you have for a person are coming with strings attached. If only my boyfriend or girlfriend would do this. If only my child would do this. If only I had more money, then I could, be more loving.
And you got to drop that if only.
There's no if only with God. If only we admitted to our sin, then God would love us. Or if only we did good things, then God would love us. But that's not the thing. No. Like he loved us before we had any if onlys.
There is that time in unconditional love where you have to let the person go. As I am letting you go to do what you need to do. Like that father who gave the prodigal son. He was always standing at the door waiting to see if the son would come back. Yeah. But there was no if onlys. Oh, if only he would come back.
The son thought there would be.
The other son did.
He thought there was conditions on it. And
yes. Evidently, he didn't understand a parent's love either. No.
But then he had a life full of conditional love. He loved his father as much as he gave him his money inheritance. He loved his friends until they ran out, and then they ran out. His friends loved him only as long as he had money. And even with the second brother, and that's just a whole other, we could keep going forever on this, but we want to let these poor podcast listeners. Yeah. And the reason that Christ hasn't returned is that he's giving time for people to come. So maybe.
Can I end with this? Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. And that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So remember that God loves you with a never ending, never stopping.
And there's nothing that you have done or need to do to earn it, or that you've lost it.
This is the season of Lent where it's going to be very much in the forefront of Jesus' death and resurrection, his death on the cross and his resurrection 3 days later for Easter. And it'll be a really good time to reflect on what that means. Mm-hmm. And yes, he died.
So I think we can show love. We can show love to others.
We have no excuse. We have no excuse.
So on that note, we shall finish this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully that you'll enjoy this series on love through the Four Loves. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and you can email us at route77ministries@gmail.com.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.
And that brings us to the end of our heartfelt exploration of agape love and the love series on the Route 77 podcast. We hope today's discussion inspires you to embrace agape love in all your relationships, from family and friends to strangers and beyond. Remember, agape challenges us to love beyond our comfort zones, see God's image in everyone, and to act with compassion and grace in a world that desperately needs it. Let's carry the message of agape love into our daily lives, making each interaction a reflection of God's boundless love for us. Until next time, keep loving and live your single life to its fullest.